Good evening and welcome to Racing. I am Matt Harrelson. Alongside with me is Pennzoil's very own Russell Parker. What's up, Russell?
How's it going, man?
Welcome back to the show. So, we're finally done with football. Super Bowl's over with. Now, Brandon and I were talking on the rundown about how we're excited for baseball. However, you're obviously excited for Daytona 500, which is only 9 days away. Which
I was
means,
so excited I had to change up the layout of
That's
the
right.
table.
Yeah, you set it up here to make it appropriate. So let's talk racing.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. So where should we start with?
Well, NASCAR recently announced, I think it was this past Monday, that they're changing up the way, not qualifying, but the way post-race inspection is done now.
And this is a big deal, right?
Yeah, very big deal because they used to, before the change, if a driver was caught, or not a driver, but the team overall was caught with an infraction, they would just get a slap on the wrist. Now they're changing it up to where the team will NASCAR can take their win away from them. So that's the big news, is that they're taking away wins now if they fail post-race inspection. I think they get two different tries at it, and if they don't get it, then they lose out, and there's no more win for them. Second place, and they finish post-race inspection, they get the win.
Okay, so many questions I have here. First of all, so what you're saying is that they'll inspect them one time, and then they'll get a second inspection, so it's not just the first time they're out.
Right.
Okay. Here's the problem I have with this. I feel like you're going to open up Pandora's box. First of all, because look, these sort of things happen quite often, don't they? Unfortunately, but I mean, there's so many different things when it comes to a race car on a Sunday that can go wrong, that can be illegal, and you could potentially cost a guy a win, potentially a championship later on over something like this missing or being out of place.
Now, it's funny you mentioned the lug nut there. If they are caught with a loose lug nut, that's not going to take the win away. There's some of them that won't do it. They're going to be a little lenient on some of them.
That's what I was wondering.
If there's a different part in the car that should not be there, that will take it away. You've seen a lot of that last year with drivers, teams. They're trying to try new things out, and it was illegal in the rule book, and so or they just pushed it so far that they went over the line. That's where NASCAR is going to draw the line on that type of stuff. If it's serious infractions, they'll handle it with that. If it's something like a lug nut, it's not going to be a big of a deal.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. But who will actually be in charge of figuring out where that line is of what's malicious? Like somebody, obviously, if a team's trying to sneak something by, they should be penalized. Right. But if it's like a mistake that they didn't mean to do, of course they could always lie about that. But I'm just kind of wondering, like, who will decide and where is that line?
It usually comes down to NASCAR's R&D department that will they'll tear down the car. Now, if they fail it after post-race inspection, they usually take the first 3 cars of the race and they'll tear them down in R&D. But that won't matter at post-race too much. But I think NASCAR is going to have to lay it out to the team, say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen if you get with this penalty, this will take your win away. If this one here happens, it won't. I think that's kind of how they're going to have to deal with things.
And this will be incorporated starting with Daytona, right?
Yep.
Do you think maybe perhaps NASCAR teams knew this was coming before the general public, but did they almost spring this on them a little quickly, a little late?
I think it's kind of been something that's been needing to do for a while now.
Okay.
For the past couple of years, you've seen a lot of drivers getting away with some really big penalties, big infractions, but there's not really nothing more than a monetary fine and docking a few points, which they can make that up really easily, especially if it's early in the season. And they already got wins underneath them, which automatically apply to the playoffs. And they'll try out new things throughout the season and it doesn't affect them. So taking the win away out of the history
big,
books.
Though.
Yeah.
That'd be like in any other sport, a team was found to have cheated, and so they end up losing the game afterwards. Like you don't really see that a lot in other sports.
Well, for racing, that's actually a standard for majority of the racing leagues out there. From your local dirt track all the way up to, I believe, IndyCar has the same situation. So NASCAR is finally catching up with what everybody else is doing.
And it'll be interesting to see how they govern this. I'm with you. I don't think it'll make as big a difference early on in the season. But when we start getting into the playoff chase and then the actual playoffs, I mean, I feel like they're going to be very meticulous about putting the car together, which you're saying is the way it should be, right?
Yeah, I think you should stay within the rules. Now, I would agree that there's probably too many rules
Perhaps.
for NASCAR drivers teams these days. But the rules are there for you. You've got them. You should know where your lines are, and you should know how far to push them.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that as we get into the season, and then further into the season. So let's talk about some crew chiefs that are moving around here.
Yeah, so there's a ton. I think there's about 15 different crew chiefs being switched around to different
Really?
teams this year.
Now, before we move on, does that happen often, or is that kind of an anomaly this year? That's a lot.
That is a lot, and I think you do see it quite a bit when you have all three series combined. But I think this is actually up on more on the Cup level this year, so that's a really big change. But there's two of them that really stand out, and that's Jimmy Johnson and Denny Hamlin. Those two drivers have had stellar crew chiefs with them forever. Of course, Jimmy Johnson, Shaq, and Nels, those guys have been the duo since the beginning of that 48 team.
7 championships later.
7 championships later, and a ton of wins underneath them. And he's Shaq and Nels is actually going to be moving over to the 24 car. He's going to be helping out William Byron. I think this is just kind of Hendrick Motorsports trying to help out the new talent as the old talent. I don't want to say pushing out, but he's up there, and he doesn't really need to prove himself anymore. He doesn't have to carry the company anymore. It's going to come down to the new talent.
I mean, let's face it. Jimmy Johnson probably will only be racing for a handful more seasons, don't you think?
I think he's got a couple more seasons left in him. I think he's getting close to his 25-year mark or 20-year mark. Can't remember which one. I think he'll hit one of those and then he'll retire. But he's got a new crew chief coming in who's from the Xfinity series. I'm going to probably bomb his name here. Kevin Meanendaring.
Yeah, Meanendaring.
He was the crew chief of Elliott Sauer, who of course retired last year down in the Xfinity series. He only had 3 wins out of the 3 years he's been down there. So obviously, I think this is going to help out the crew chief himself being underneath a top talented driver.
Yeah,
and that's going to play into maybe him getting into another driver later on. Just overall building up talent again.
And he's got some big numbers here that you wrote in your notes. 3 wins, 39 top 5s, 77 top 10s in just 3 years. That's pretty impressive.
And for the Xfinity level, yeah, that's pretty big.
It's a good resume. Let me ask you something else about crew chiefs before we move forward. We see in other sports where most of the coaches, and you can call a crew chief a coach, right?
Yeah.
Are former players. How often do, after NASCAR guys retire, become crew chiefs? Is that a thing? Do we see that? Because most of them, I don't know them by name,
No, I mean, most of them, they do kind of be a driver. They've driven before, but
they weren't the big names kind of thing.
No, they usually just kind of, they're the ones who work on the car. They're pretty much the top mechanic, if you will. They know what goes in that car. They know how to be that leader on as far as the team goes on that box and on pit road. They handle that situation, and of course they bounce information back between the driver and him to work out what the strategy is going to be. They know the pit window. They know how far they can go on fuel mileage and how old the tires are. But they get that most of the time. I'm
just sitting here thinking, who better to be a crew chief than somebody who's been in it? That just makes sense to me. So. Now, we talked about JJ, so what about Denny Hamlin? Because he's switching chiefs too, right?
Yeah, and he didn't have a great season this past year with his crew chief, but yeah, he's always had a good solid relationship with Mike Wheeler, who's been with him since as far as I can look back on. But he's going to be moving. Mike Wheeler's going to be moving to the 95 car for Levine Family Racing. I'm not sure he's taking over that car this year, but as for Hamlin, his new crew chief is going to be Chris Gabehart. Now, last season, he sat on the pit box for Brandon Jones, another Xfinity driver. So, once again, they're bringing talent up from the Xfinity level to the Cup Series level.
And that also is what you see in other sports because just like in anything else, it's all cyclical. Once the older guys start getting older, it's time to move them out and start to move in younger talent, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Also, some pretty big numbers, 2 top 5s, 17 top 10s. So, together, those two, pretty good combination, right?
Yeah. I think, like I said, Hamlin and Wheeler, they didn't really have a fantastic season, but, they've had a great career together.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, like you just said, it's time to move in some new talent and maybe help out that 11 team. I know Hamlin's got a long-term extension, a long-term contract for a while, so he's not going anywhere. So they got to do something else.
Now you've got written here the number 11 team has slipped from being a team to watch out for to not much more than a mid-pack car. So what do you mean by that?
So, Hamlin and the 11 team are usually really good. They're really strong. They started off strong last season, and usually they start off pretty strong every season. But they just kind of dwindle out as the season goes on, and they didn't come out with any wins in 2018, as opposed to one. I think they had 1 or 2 races win in the year before that. So they're not really been up the top of the level as they could be. And so now they're kind of sitting around the middle. They're not terrible, but they're not great. They're just in the middle of that field.
They are the Charlotte Hornets of NASCAR.
Yeah.
Also new for 2019, let's talk about the new aero and horsepower rules package. So explain what that is, because personally, I don't have a clue what that means.
Well, so the new rules package for 2019 is based on what was ran at the 2018 All-Star race in Charlotte last year. What that was closer racing. It makes it a 1.5 mile track drive more like a Daytona track. So it's the close, tight pack racing that you see at Daytona and Talladega, now into the 1.5 mile tracks such as Charlotte, Atlanta, Texas, those type of tracks. So that's been alluded to, that it will create better racing on the surface of those tracks, because they've not been exciting the past couple of years. People have been wanting to see different tracks because those tracks have not been great at all for the racing. So NASCAR is trying to find a way to make that more exciting. And I think personally they found that with this package, because the All-Star race was really fun to watch last year. There could have been some more tweaks on it, but overall I think it's going to be a really good package.
So you say, it says here that horsepower has been reduced.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you say to someone who's like, well, that means they're going to go slower, right?
Yeah, but nobody's gonna really notice that. You'll notice the way that they race in the race itself, but you're not gonna see a difference in how long it takes them to get around the track by much. You might see half a second knocked off or something like that.
It'll be a thing where usually they're all going around the track at 200 miles an hour. Now they'll all be going around the track at 185, but they're all still in the pack together, right?
Yeah,
so
it's
you won't
all
really
together.
notice a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I got you. All right, so actually, let me ask you this: the aero and horsepower rules package. What does that actually do to the car itself? Can you explain that?
So as far as the aero rules, what they do is they will create a new spoiler on the back of the car, and that can increase that will increase the drag on the car. I hope I'm getting this right. My technical side in NASCAR is not that strong, but they increase the size of the splitter, and it increases more drag, so it pulls from the car a bit more where they don't go as fast. So the wind's kind of playing in a big role in that. And of course, knocking out horsepower is going to slow the car down.
Gotcha. Speaking of spoilers, let's say we go to Daytona. You finish first, I finish second. Well, when we get back into the garage, I walk by your spoiler and I go, bam, and I bend it. So then you fail inspection and I win, right?
Very well. As long as no cameras got you, I think it would be all right.
Yeah, but still, just sledgehammer to your spoiler. Well, he's made it more aerodynamic. So, and then let's talk about the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So the induction ceremony was held last Friday. Pretty big name involved, right?
Oh yeah, Jeff Gordon obviously is the biggest one that comes out of that. My childhood driver. I grew up as a Gordon fan, and I switched over to Logano right as soon as I figured out Gordon wasn't gonna be around much longer, so I needed a new driver. But 93 wins I think it was that he's gotten.
Automatic
3
first ballot,
championships.
no thinking,
no
right?
doubt about it.
And I remember when this was introduced, we were actually just getting ready to go on the air to do a sports show. And we had the list of names, and you and I were trying to figure out who was going to get in. Of course, Gordon was an easy one. Oh, yeah. But Roger Penske and Joe Gibbs, 2 team owners, we figured they'd get in too.
Roush Fenway, excuse me, not Joe Gibbs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was Roush.
So Gibbs didn't get in?
I think he's already. I'm not quite sure if he's in now or if he's already considered for next year.
Because that's one.
I made a mistake on the notes there, and it should be Jack Roush.
Gotcha. And then 2 more drivers, Alan Kawicki and Davey Allison. To me, 2 guys that were no-brainers too, right?
Yeah, both of them, of course, has tremendous seasons with their careers. Unfortunately, both of them have resulted in a death.
Right.
One of them was going to Bristol Motor Speedway and died in a plane crash. The other one was a helicopter accident. So, unfortunately, they lost their lives at a really young in a really young life and career. So, but yeah, they definitely got the recognition that they deserve for their careers.
Short careers, but still good enough to make the Hall of Fame. So, and I just got a quick story here. When NASCAR was coming through Rockingham all the time, the Catholic church that's beside Cole Auditorium was having some kind of like barbecue dinner, and it was during the weekend of a race, and in walks Davey Allison. And I knew who he was. My dad was there with me because my dad was in charge of security at the Speedway at the time. And I was able to talk to him and get his autograph, and I was a little kid. But that's one of the things I miss about NASCAR being here. And I feel like if they were to come back here today, it would still be different. Like those guys came into the community and went to eat at Little Bo's Steakhouse and stuff like that, and I thought that was really cool. So just one quick memory about Davey Allison. Somewhere I've got his autograph. I'll have to go find that. All right, so what else do we need to talk about? Because obviously Daytona is right around the corner here.
Yeah, well, of course, with Daytona, you can't have the Daytona 500 without the Clash.
All the festivities, right?
Yeah, the Speed Weeks has officially begun. Of course, on this Sunday, we'll have some racing. Of course, the Clash of Daytona will be starting at 3 p.m. This Sunday. So I am excited for that race. 75 laps with 2 segments involved, 25 and a 50.
Why so quick? Why such a small race? Or short race, rather?
It's kind of like, I guess you can look at this race as like the preseason games of NFL.
It's like the Hall of Fame game sort of kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's just a way to kick it off and have a good time. No points. A lot of the drivers who get in are mostly based on polls, or they've won polls from last season, or they've won a poll at Daytona 500, or a race winner. Those are how you get qualified to get into this race. So I think it's gonna be a lot of fun overall. And the way they qualify is by random selection. I'm not sure if they get how much practice they get on the track before they get out there. It's kind of just have at it and go for it.
I like that though. And that broadcast will be live on FS1 and Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, and hopefully in the future right here with us on New Classic Rock.
That would be awesome.
That would be right. Yeah, that would be cool. Anything else we need to add?
Well, as far as a winner goes, I'm gonna predict a winner, and I'm gonna say.
See, here's what we're gonna do. I was gonna ask you to predict a winner, and then I'm gonna ask you to take a week and then do it again this time next week, because that'll actually be the show right before Daytona 500, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna take a pick here for. First of all, I'm gonna take the pick for the Clash.
Okay. And, I don't have a pen, but we'll write it down.
All right. So, a couple of weeks ago, I put out a article about the first 10 races, and then that was the Clash prediction, and that is Denny Hamlin. I'm going to stick with that one despite the crew chief's change. He's been very well at plate racing. He's usually won either a duel for Daytona, or he's won the 500, or he's won the Clash. So he's done them all. I think he's the most experienced driver for the Clash this year. Kevin Harvick will probably be the guy that will be sitting in his rearview mirror the most of the race, though.
Okay, so make sure your car's up to date, man. Otherwise, Kevin will be right behind you. And talking about Denny Hamlin, just like in other sports, sometimes when coaches move, they just need a different change of scenery. Same thing for players. So perhaps it'll be good for Hamlin to have a new crew chief. So, all right. So you're taking Hamlin for Daytona 500 9 days from now, a week from Sunday, down there in Florida. So I know you're excited about it.
Oh man, it's been 80-something days since
Too many,
the last
right?
race. Yeah,
too many. So. But that's going to do it for this edition of Ross Racing. Of course, now that we're back into NASCAR season, you can expect to find this every week right here as part of the RO Sports Show's series of shows. So we appreciate everybody tuning in tonight and every night to all of the Ross shows. Russell Parker, I'm Matt Harrelson. We'll see you next week.